Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. We are now in season 4 with over 1,300 videos and are being viewed and heard around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished entrepreneur from India, Mr. Saurav Chawla. Saurav, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Saurav is the co-founder of OkayGo, which has been acquired by Betterplace. So, Saurav, let's talk about OkayGo. Tell me about the venture and your motivation to start it.
Sure. So, the motivation to start OkayGo came from another venture that I was running. 5 years ago, I moved back from the US to India. I was an investment banker in the US.
Okay.
So one fine day, I decided to move back to India without knowing what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to take that plunge and start my entrepreneurial journey. And after moving to India, I set up a food business.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Fifth Avenue Bakery and Café.
Mm-hmm.
It has been successful. Basically, it's bringing the American food and desserts specifically to India, because me and my wife were missing that when we moved back. While running that business, I got really close to blue-collar workforce, and I really got to understand the challenges a small and medium enterprise can face while hiring blue-collar workforce, and also hiring in a flexible manner, because a business like an F&B business has a lot of seasonality. You want more people on the weekends, you want more people in the evening and dinner times, and there was no tech solution at that time. Even now, I think there are very few players in this space to hire high quality gig workforce to reduce the fixed cost of enterprises, as well as to provide the gig workforce higher earning per hour opportunities. So from that business, I got this idea. And around 3 years ago, I set out on this journey of OkayGo. So OkayGo is basically focused on providing gig workforce, blue-collar gig workforce, high earning per hour opportunities in a flexible manner.
Okay.
So how can they work at different enterprises during the same day or in the same month to optimize their earnings per hour? Because it's challenging these days for enterprises to provide high earning per hour opportunities throughout the day. They might have their peaks and troughs. So we're trying to optimize this and bring the enterprises together with the blue-collar workforce in a flexible manner.
So, I remember, I'm 65 years old. I remember when I was doing my college, I used to go around doing market surveys for organizations and make some 25 rupees per survey and so on. So gig sort of has always been there as a part of the world economy.
Yeah.
What has changed in the last 2 or 3 years that the gig economy has become so prominent in India and the world?
I think you're absolutely right. It has been there forever in an unorganized manner, in an informal manner. The idea is, how do we organize it? And over the last 3-4 years, especially outside India, we have seen big players. Some of them have become unicorns who have tried to organize this sector. India, I think still we are at a very early stage. The idea is, how can we use technology to make sure both parties who might be already doing gigs in an unorganized manner can do it in an organized manner and reap more benefits through technology. So I think people are catching up to the idea, because the enterprises can see the benefits of using technology to manage the gig workforce. The gig workforce is seeing benefits of using technology and getting hyper local opportunities versus trying to get those opportunities through their friends. So it's trying to. This is the only way to scale this. This might be happening already, but not in a scaled and efficient manner. That is where we are trying to do that.
And how large would you say is the population of gig workers in India?
This is an interesting question. I think there are different estimates. I would say there was a BCG report 1 or 2 years ago done together with Dell Foundation, and they pegged the gig workforce that is already using technology in some manner or the other, around 20 to 30 million people in India. So these guys are actually using technology in some manner, whether it is a Swiggy driver or rider, or a Zomato rider, or someone who's probably working in a manufacturing facility with some kind of tech. But if I go to a little bit of an unorganized sector, this might be more than 100 million people without tech usage. So anywhere between 20 million to 100 million, depending on how you look at it.
Yep, and that's a huge market. But again, you lived in the US for so many years. There is a term that is very unique in the US, which is I'm a contractor.
Yeah.
You take an year by year contract and keep working.
Yeah.
How is the contract employment in the US different from the gig world?
I think the one difference that we have to mitigate is as a contract employee, you have a decent visibility on your earnings. Even though you're a contractual employee in the US, you have a decent visibility on your earnings. You have a decent earning per hour, per day, per month. That is not the case in India to that extent. There is a challenge if you're not a full-time worker, and most of these enterprises are moving away from full-time workforce to gig workforce. But there's a challenge to give sustainable gig opportunities to the contract employees.
Right.
And the visibility is less. The earning per hour, I feel that for gig employees, the earning per hour should be higher than the full-time workers because they're actually working on the peak periods, right? They'll have to find jobs outside that peak period, which the enterprises give them opportunity for. That to educate people about that is still a work in progress. So I think we're on the way to providing that transparency, visibility, and sustainability for gig workforce. But I think the Western world has done that to a better extent so far.
But do you see a lot of young Indians moving towards multiple jobs and multiple sources of income?
So we are playing mainly in the blue-collar workforce, and we see that happening on the ground. People are, you will be surprised how smart people are, even in the blue-collar space. They are very efficient in using a smartphone. They are very efficient in optimizing which app to log in at what time. But they're still doing it in an unorganized fashion. So we are trying to organize it for them. But they are very open to, depending on their lifestyle, depending on the place that they are from, they belong to. Within that area, they're very flexible in finding higher earning per hour opportunities and optimizing based on that. It's just that they may not have access to all of those high earning per hour opportunities in an efficient manner, and that is where we come into the picture. But they're open to. They're already doing in some form or the other. You might see a Uber driver, having Ola and Uber apps both open at the same time and trying to optimize which task to pick up. But so they're used to it. It's just that they don't get the holistic picture. Can I organize my day in a way that doing these things will lead to a highest earning for me? That is the missing part.
Well said. And yet, Saurav, as I was reading about you and I've reading about some other people in the gig world, this seems to be challenging the traditional Indian mindset of educate, get a job, and create your assets. How do gig workers build careers?
I think we can talk both in the white collar and the blue collar space. White collar, I think, especially in the software development or the design, career paths, you see people getting very anxious these days because if they stay in one job, they feel that they're not getting, new technologies to work on. And if they don't do that, they don't get that opportunity, they move to another organization. So it's more about, I think, skill development than years of experience, right? It's more about how much skills you have, how much technologies can you work at. And most of the time, these guys find this access to new technologies by doing gigs versus staying in a full-time opportunity. So they are already doing that and there is value for that. I think gone are the days where you're getting a higher salary because of the years of experience. It's more important to have the know-how of the latest skills or latest technologies. So that is in the white collar space. In the blue collar space, I think it's a little bit more challenging because, for example, if a worker is in the logistics space, it's a delivery boy. It's harder to find gigs for that person to develop skill sets for that person. But the idea is it will be a smoother transition if that delivery worker is getting gigs, maybe in the F&B space, retail space, warehouse space, where there's a little bit more skill development and probably less labor-intensive work. It'll be easier to expose that person to gigs. The enterprises will also be open to expose gigs for that person versus hiring that person as a full-time worker in a different domain. So the idea is to expose them to gigs, build their skills, and then hopefully they can transition. Because very high labor-intensive work can be sustained for 5 or 10 years, but post that you need a little bit more, a little less labor-intensive job, a little bit more skilled job, where you can have an even higher earning per hour opportunity.
Very well said. Very well said. And now coming to the comment you made about the white-collar workers, from an organizational perspective, and I work for very large organizations, one of the things that most top management looks for is to get talent at the young level and groom them right to the very top. Now, if a majority of the people become gig workers, what happens to succession?
That's an interesting challenge. I think the idea is to keep the workers that are in-house engaged. I think the organizations cannot be selfish. They cannot just say that, okay, I have to get this task done. I think you have to expose newer, more modern technologies to these workers, to their employees, so that they're there to do your task, the employer task as well, but they're also there to build their skill set. So I think it's very important to manage that. It's very important to make sure that the work that is given to these employees is not getting very mundane. You are trying to expose new technologies to them. Regarding having a lot of gig workforce, I think it has to be a mix of full-time workforce and gig workforce.
Right.
You can probably have the full-time workforce for the most important tasks, and whenever you are trying to build new technologies, maybe you can bring these experts out from outside, and then also train your workforce internally. So I think it should always be a mix of both. I don't think we are seeing a world where the entire full-time workforce will get transitioned to gig workforce. The full-time workforce will remain, but the gig workforce will supplement that and take it to the next level.
Fascinating. So one more question relating to OkayGo before I move to some questions on startups. As an entrepreneur who's had a successful exit, what have been some of your learnings from your exit?
One learning is that there is no science to it. There is no science to getting an exit. We are in a risky space, right? You start with a venture, and I think 99.9% of the startups fail. So there is no science. I don't think there is a path that you can just follow and then you can get an exit or be successful. That is one thing I've learned. A lot of it has to do with the right circumstances outside your control. So you have to live with that. I think you have to give your best. It could be 50-60% of your own hard work, effort, motivation, intelligence. The rest 40-50% might be the right circumstances and luck. Luck has to play a big role. So you cannot try to game this process. You have to give your best and always feel that you are basically playing in an uncertain field. So you have to give your best and not overthink it.
Correct.
Just go through the process, and just at the time when the opportunities come to you, you have to take the right decisions. You have to be nimble on your feet. So one is don't overthink, give all in. And I think second is be flexible. So in my case, there were a lot of uncertainties in the last 3 years. There was COVID happened in the space.
Yeah.
Blue collar technology in general in India is not a very attractive space for entrepreneurs to get into. There haven't been a lot of successes in this space. So for the first time when I was trying to raise funds, a lot of people told me that this space will not touch. So, but I was not discouraged. So I think you have to be true to your vision. Don't listen to everyone. I think you have to listen to people and adapt to it, but you have to still be true to your calling. And in the process, be very flexible and nimble. So in our case, we went through COVID and we had to pivot a couple of times. Had we stuck to what we were doing originally, we might have failed. So I think being flexible and pivoting a couple of times was really, really helpful as well.
Fascinating. Now let me move to some questions for you on startups. I mean, from what you've told me, you're a twice successful entrepreneur, one with the Fifth Avenue Bakery and Cafe, and then with OkayGo. And I'm not sure if you did any similar startups in the US. But as someone who has been a startup entrepreneur, let me start by asking you, based on your experience, what are some of the basic mistakes a lot of startup entrepreneurs make?
I think I don't want to sound patronizing to anyone, but I can just give some advice and what I've seen around me. I think a lot of people are just chasing valuation. At times, there is less, and I think the market is correcting itself right now, and rightfully so. There was a lot of fad, I think, over the last 2-3 years by showing MAUs and DAOs and getting crazy valuation, no revenue startups, zero revenue startups making, getting valued at $1 billion plus, etc. And I think that sets a wrong precedent, because a lot of people get into this to make short-term money. They're not looking at a long-term path. They are focusing on the wrong things. They're not focusing on the unit economics. So I think my advice to everyone who's starting this entrepreneurial journey is to get your basics right. If you chase something which is a fad, like edtech or fintech or whatever was the fad over the last 3 years, and don't have your basics right, if the markets are not right, you will get crushed, as is happening right now. So make sure your numbers are correct, make sure your unit economics are correct, and you're not chasing after some fad. You have your own path, and you believe in that path, and there is a path to profitability in that path, and then the rest can follow.
Fascinating. The next question that a lot of startup entrepreneurs have, and I'm sure you've been asked the same question, is when should a startup start to scale up? Because there's constant pressure from people who give you money saying, go national, go pan-India, go global, etc., etc.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
It's a tricky thing, right? Because a lot of times the VCs or the investors who are putting money in you will not be very patient. So a lot of times I see before product market fit, people trying to scale up in a crazy manner. So there is a give and take there. I think you have to make sure your product market fit is almost there, or you're past that stage, and then you scale. Even if there's a lot of pressure from the investors, I think you have to find the right investors. You have to believe that the investors understand that it's a longer term game, rather than a 3-4 years game. It might be an 8 or 9 years game, and I mean, always try to push back as much as you can, that, let me prove my unit economics, prove my product market fit, and then scale. But I understand there are some challenges, and sometimes you will probably find some problems and issues after scaling that you may not have found at a very small scale. The product market fit at a higher scale will be a different question at that time versus at a smaller scale. So sometimes you may have to scale even without 100% of a product market fit. So there is no science. If you feel that, but at least some sort of product market fit should be there, if not complete product market fit, for you to start scaling.
Fascinating. My next question to you, Saurav, is that it's often discussed and asked, should you go solo or should you have a co-founder? And I see you are a co-founder, and even in your other business, you probably are a co-founder with your wife.
Yeah. I think it's being solo. I wouldn't go solo. I think it's a very lonely journey anyways. And I think it's always better to have a sounding board more than anything else, right? You need someone who you can bounce off ideas, who can show you a different perspective to what you are thinking, who can bring different skill sets to what you bring. You can probably take some load off you. Like, you cannot, I mean, I personally feel it would have been much harder for me to do this solo, especially given these were the first two things that I did. That is my advice, but nothing stops. So they have been very successful solo entrepreneurs. But if you have a choice, you should seek a co-founder, but finding a co-founder is also not very easy.
Not easy, yeah.
It's, I mean, I think the two big decisions you make in your life is finding a life partner and finding a co-founder in your startup.
Well said.
So I think you have to, apart from the skill set and bouncing of ideas and intelligence, I think ethics of a co-founder, I think the same attitude as you have, that timing has to really match. Otherwise, I would, if you're not able to find someone who has the same ethics as you and the same attitude as you, and then even then the co-founder is bringing that skill set, I would say probably go solo. Because if those two conditions are not met, then you're kind of asking for trouble, because it's going to be a lonely journey. It's going to have a lot of ups and downs. And those two things, if not met, will cause trouble later.
Wonderful. So I have time for two more questions. My next question to you is on funding. I can ask this two ways. One is, how long should I bootstrap versus when should I pick up money? Or what is your advice to entrepreneurs who want to raise money?
So I've done two startups. One is bootstrapped, and one is when I raised funding from seed stage. So again, there is no right answer there. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. in my case, one was a more retail brick and mortar business, which I felt it didn't require too much money in the first place, and I felt it'll be harder to sell as an investment story at that stage. So I went bootstrapped, and it worked out. The second startup is a tech startup where I felt I need a tech team, which can be costly, and I need that scale for marketing and growth. And my own funds might not be sufficient at that point, so I raised funds, and that journey also proved successful. But so there is no right answer, but I think it depends on the situation you are in, what kind of startups you are planning, how much funds you have. I wouldn't recommend if you have out of 100% of your savings, you invest 100% in your startup. I wouldn't recommend that. Maybe you can put 20% in your startup and 30% because you have to make sure that you have some funds for sustaining your lifestyle expenses. And then raise the others. So it depends on how much you want to raise. Sometimes I think it could also be that you want to put in a little bit of your money, get some kind of a MVP done, and then showcase to the investors, and you might get a better valuation. That could also be another way of approaching it.
Fascinating. And sort of my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. What would you say are 3 lessons you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
One is you have to make sure you have to sometimes douse the external noise. In my case, I was choosing a vertical which hadn't had a lot of successes in the past, in the blue-collared job technology space. So I didn't have any precedents to go by. It was harder for me to raise funds, but I stuck to my path that I thought I should take, and it worked out. So that is very important. 2 is be flexible and nimble in your journey. What you set out to do, you shouldn't do that without thinking about the market conditions, without thinking about the troughs and the upsides that happen in the market. So you have to be cognizant of that. And third, I would say is just I think be all in. A lot of times I feel people who think about starting a startup journey, they are doing their full-time job. They feel that, they'll start investing 20-30% of their time and come up with an idea. And if the idea becomes successful, then they leave their job and start doing it. I completely left my job. I was an investment banker. I got promoted to vice president. And at that time, I left my job. It was a very hard thing to do.
Correct.
But there's no other way. I don't think you can come up with something which is value additive while doing something else. I think you have to be all in. I keep telling to all my friends who ask me, what should they do? I tell them first, quit your job and figure out what are the different things you can do. It's very hard to manage all those things together.
Well said. And on that note, and your incredible words of wisdom, the last one being, there is no gig in startups. As an entrepreneur,
Absolutely.
You're all in. You cannot do 2 things together.
Absolutely.
Thank you for talking to me about your journey, about OkayGo, about your incredible learnings and your lessons, which are stay with your path, be nimble and flexible, and be all in. Saurav, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for sharing with me your journey. And thank you for being a part of the brand called You.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's an honor to be invited in your podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.